So what do we mean exactly by pass-through attributes? Well, attributes are properties associated with various types of control within our ASPX pages, and the term pass-through is really only intended to mean that we, rather than IronSpeed using those attributes directly itself in all cases, they are frequently passed through to ASP.NET at runtime. So let's have a look at some properties of some of the controls that we've got on this screen. We're looking at the Show Categories table screen within the Southwind example that's shipped with Designer. If I click right here and go to the properties, you'll see that under there in that pop-up context menu I have an attributes option. Let's select that. So here within this tree view control on the left hand side, I've got the entire page structure of the Show Categories table page, and within there I'm looking at the row edit button at the field level, so the row level within that table, and here I'm looking at the attributes associated with the categories row edit button. The list of possible attributes, depending on what type of control you're looking at, is extremely large, but let's have a look at the examples that we've got here. So the first of these is whether the attribute or the clicking of the button causes validation, what type of CSS class is being used there, the image URL, so that's actually the location on our server of the image associated with that button, as this is an image button, the redirect URL, so on clicking that button exactly where we're going to navigate the application to, and then a tooltip. So to give you an example of how IronSpeed Designer enables you to change some of those entities or attributes in more user-friendly ways, let's click over to Display, and look. What I'm looking at here is the image file URL as we saw in the attributes. If I change that, that would also be reflected here in the attributes entry within the screen. If I go back to Display, I can similarly change my tooltip text. Let's put in a random or our own example, just so that we can see how that works. So clicking back to attributes there, you can now see that rather than using that resource file entry for the tooltip, we're now using my own value, which I typed in directly. So if I OK that and we do a live preview of our application, we should be able to see that pop up. So let's click over to live preview and have a look at our tooltip change that we've made. And as we go over here, if I hover over one of the edit row buttons on any of the rows within there, we can see our tooltip pop up exactly as we defined it. So let's go back to design mode again and have a look under properties and back to attributes. Now the important point to recognize about attributes is that they effectively fall into two different categories. The first of these are types of attribute which are used by IronSpeed Designer, but the other type are properties of ASP.NET code elements which we don't have direct access to within IronSpeed. And by using pass-through attributes, we can, to coin that phrase, we can pass through the value of that property directly through to ASP.NET. So a way to get an idea of what other attributes are available to us, depending on which type of control we're looking at within our ASPX page, is to go into Visual Studio and have a look at it there. So I'm going to cancel this briefly, and I'm going to click across into Visual Studio, and then we'll be able to see what other types of attribute are available to us, in this case for an image button. Let's have a look. So if we could of course click across to Visual Studio simply by clicking the Visual Studio button on the toolbar within IronSpeed Designer. I've already got it open on my machine, so I'm going to pop straight across there. So here I'm looking within the Solution Explorer. I'm looking at the Show Categories table ASPX page, and in here in the source, if I click on the Categories row edit button, which is the edit button that we've been looking at within IronSpeed Designer, on the right hand side here I now have the properties pop up, And these are all of the properties, or the ASP.NET properties, which are associated with an image button type control. And all of those are now available to me by using pass-through attributes in IronSpeed Designer. So for example, if I wanted to change the back color, I could select a back color value within Visual Studio here. I take a hex value there. To be able to incorporate that within IronSpeed Designer, all I need to do is go back to IronSpeed Designer, select Properties and Attributes, and literally enter the value or the name of the property and the value exactly as I had it within Visual Studio. So having done that now, if I pop over to Live Preview and we regen that, you can now see that I've got a background color on my image button. I've still obviously got my tooltip text, which is still there, but I've integrated that and included that within my generated application simply by introducing it as a pass-through attribute. We just go back to Properties and Attributes, and there's our back color entity. One thing that's worth possibly pointing out, the attribute list is sorted alphabetically, so you were always adding an entry at the bottom of that list. In this case, obviously, I added back color. You can have a tendency to pop back into here and think, well, where's it gone? And the answer is it's popped up to the top simply because it's sorted alphabetically. One of the other things that it appears on that screen at that stage is an attribute list link at the top here. That's going to take us across into the online help for IronSpeed and give us an indication of some of the attributes that are there. However, the important point to remember is that the attribute list is effectively context sensitive depending on what type of control we're looking at. So it's a bit nonsensical to ask for a complete list of attributes, because that list changes depending on the control we're looking at and discussing. But within IronSpeed we do have a significant amount of help to give us the more common scenarios, the more common attributes that are available to us, how to change them, why we would use them, and in what circumstances. I'd like to point that out to you because I know pass-through attributes are something that can be quite confusing to people, simply because it's not entirely clear to you in some circumstances whether the attribute is being applied, whether it's something specific to Designer itself, or whether you're looking at the attribute or the property of an ASP.NET component. So the pass-through attributes help is available within the IronSpeed Designer help in Part 3 under pass-through attributes, and there are a number of examples in here which I'd advise you to have a good look at when you begin to start looking at how to apply pass-through attributes to your code. Let's pop back to Designer though, and just remember that all of those entries that were available to us within Visual Studio, Studio's popped up because I've made a change there. Let's just say no to that for briefly. So what are pass-through attributes? They are simply a means by which I can affect the properties of any control on my screen and get access to the ASP.NET properties of that control directly through IronSpeed Designer without needing to go into Visual Studio to access them. Best way to get them, always pop across the Visual Studio, select the element that you're looking at, and you will have a full list of the properties available to you displayed within Visual Studio there. I hope that's been useful to you and given you at least a bit of an insight into what pass-through attributes are and how you can make use of them within your generated application. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.